Go.
Let me welcome you to Journey with Dr. Robert Maddox. I know him best as Bob. We have been friends for over 50 years. I knew him when his hair was a different color, and we have been friends all these years. There have been many silences on those years, but we've always been able to break that silence and pick up right where we left off. Bob and his family are very important in our life and journey. And I'm glad with his insight and the way that he loves to think outside the box, he has invited us to be a part of this journey. So, Bob, we welcome you and invite you to help us to explore the Psalter today.
Thank you, JW. We go way, way back. As JW mentioned, from time to time, God enables us to have important people in our lives. And from the beginning of 50 years ago, JW was one of those. I'm so grateful. And as he said earlier, we'll go for years sometimes and not talk, and then actually to pick up where we left off. So I'm thanking him very much for helping do this. I don't learn any more of this kind of technology than I have to. So I'm glad we've got people like JW and others who can help us do this. Some of you may know, but I'll tell you anyway, that Linda and I are in the process of moving from an assisted living in Bethesda, Maryland, to a lovely assisted living in Gainesville, Georgia. We are moving to be closer to Andy and Tina. We're moving, and frankly, because it's for the same level of care and amenities, a whole lot less expensive than it is in Bethesda, Maryland. So all of those factors come together. I came down about 2 months ago to get settled, and then Linda will be here this coming Saturday afternoon. She and Ben are flying down from Maryland this coming Saturday afternoon. And I had a phone call. Let me cut that off. Elizabeth and Georgia are driving a truck. Bonnie and Clyde are driving a truck down here Friday with furniture for Linda's apartment. And then Ben and Linda will be flying in on Saturday afternoon. Big week for all of us. As a part of my life at Phoenix on the Lake, where we are, I am picking up a weekly study of the Bible. I'm not calling it a Bible study because my aim is to get down inside the Bible. This has been my hobby and passion and really wonderful pursuit in my own life for a number of years now. What is this grand book that we have had given to us by ancestors, by the Spirit of God for these 2,500, 3,000 years? It is by any stretch, any measure, some would say the greatest book in the language and literature today. And it certainly has had an outsized impact on the world for more than 2,000 years. And so I think it deserves the total book deserves our careful attention. I'm trying to begin to call the Old Testament the Hebrew Bible, and I'm trying to call the New Testament the Christian Testament. Old and new do not work for me because the two bodies of literature, the two bodies of writing, are too closely entwined to be considered old and new. We do know for sure that our earliest Jesus ancestors depended totally for the first several years of their existence on the Hebrew Bible. Actually, they depended on a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible that some Hebrew scholars gave us in about 300 BCE that shaped the lives of those early Jesus people because they didn't have a Christian Testament. This is another pursuit that we could do sometime. probably the earliest, the first writing that has made it into what we would consider to be the Christian Testament would be early letters of the Apostle Paul in the 50s CE. So we're trying to get our heads together. And then I've just used two other terms that probably you're very familiar with, BCE and CE. Rather than BC, before Christ, more and more people are writing today BCE, before the Common Era. And then talking about more modern times, CE, the Common Era. It still marked the imaginary birth of Jesus on December 25th in some year, a long time ago. A monk decided he would create a calendar, 34th century? I didn't look that up. Anyway, so when we get back in what we normally would call BC, before Christ, we're using BCE, and from beginning of what we think is the birth of Jesus, the advent of Jesus, we're using CE, or Common Era. So a little bit of housekeeping information there. And I'm also with Hebrew Bible talking about Yahweh. Dr. Wright and others that I depend on pay more attention and think Yahweh is a better understanding of our understanding of God. And Jesus probably, when he was describing God, would probably use the word Adonai. So I'm moving back and forth between Yahweh and Adonai. And I take into careful account one's view of inspiration, however you want to understand that is up to you. But I always, in the last many years, I've tried to remind myself that these documents that we have in the Bible were written by people like you and me. Some of them were highly trained Hebrew scholars. We call them the scribes. We'll be talking more about them. Others were people like Paul, who came out of the early Jesus movement, well trained, maybe a rabbi. We don't know that, but people. They had families. They had other jobs. None of them made a living off of this. They had wives. They had children. They probably had cranky in-laws sometimes to deal with. They were just people who were, from the depths of their souls, reaching out, trying to understand their relationship with Yahweh, with the holy, with Adonai, with the beyond, any kind of way they were understanding. And they had a deep passion to locate themselves in the grand sweep of history as they understood history. So they were people. That's the thing that I want us to understand. Men and a few women, far too women, but mostly men, had great insights from a number of sources in their lives to produce the great documents that we have. So they are people. When we think of the Hebrew Bible, when we think of the Bible as a whole, a couple of things that I have discovered, thanks, I knew it, but I didn't know it either until recently. Two pivotal events in the life of the ancient Israelites played a major role in producing the Hebrew Bible, which then ushered in years to come, the Christian Testament. And those two events are events that are talked about in our Bible. And the first of these are two defeats. If you will remember, over the centuries, the little tiny strip of land on the Mediterranean that we've called Palestine, Judea, Canaan, they produced a lot of small kingdoms, but they produced in particular two that have shaped and have given us the Bible and have given us Yahweh. The country of Israel, in the little bit northern part of Israel, and the kingdom of Judah around Jerusalem. So you have the country, the kingdom of Israel, and you have the kingdom of Judah. The Bible, as we have it, talks about these two. The Assyrian Empire, which was a powerful, powerful empire that emanated from what we now have understood as Iraq, came sweeping around and swallowed up Israel, the kingdom of Israel. The date that most scholars give is 722 BCE. Wiped them out, deported, imported. It was a devastating event. The smaller kingdom of Judah survived another 100 or so years. And by 586, 87, the Babylonian Empire had come along and had swallowed up the Assyrian Empire. And so Babylon was ruling that part of the world. And the tiny kingdom of Judah, a lot of political stuff going on, ran afoul of the Babylonian Empire. And the Babylonians came sweeping in. And that's when Jerusalem was destroyed. The Temple of Solomon was destroyed. And an untold number, probably several thousand, of the people of Judah, of Jerusalem, were then carried off into captivity into the kingdom of Babylon, which had replaced Assyria. You're not going to remember all that stuff, except the Bible. Dr. Wright and others with him say the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, emerged during the time of the Babylonian exile. I'm giving you a lot of stuff here, but you can kind of remember part of it. The Babylonian captivity of the Jews, Israelites, lasted 75 or 80 years, but had a lasting impact on the people, on Israelites. Let's call them Israelites because we had not yet begun to use the term Jews. The scribes who survived set about to write a narrative that would give a sense of future to these two defeated Semite people. Two devastating defeats, two devastating destructions that upset 900 years of life for an unknown number of people in those two small kingdoms. Typically, when a kingdom fell, the people disappeared. The Assyrians did, the Babylonians did, until excavation began in the 19th century, 18th and 19th century. These scribes, unknown, anonymous scribes, smart men who knew how to use the developing Hebrew language, wrote a narrative over a period of some decades that would enable these Israelites to survive as a people. These scribes, with their vision, understood that these two tiny kingdoms, two tiny plots of people, would never again have the strength to be a viable kingdom in the midst of all of the other powerful kingdoms of that world. But they could become a nation. Rather than a kingdom, they could become a nation. And that reminds me again of our own story as Americans. Our founding fathers and a few mothers, 1776, 1782, decided that we in America would not be a kingdom. We would not have a king, but we would be a nation. We would be a people. And they set about to create documents, narratives, story that would enable us to be a people. And we persist. The Israelites, now the Jews, have also persisted for these many, many years. So it worked. Okay. Now, to the Psalms themselves. The Psalms came about, back up, let me say it this way. When the scribes set about to work on the Psalter, the book containing the Psalms, scholars say that there were 119 identifiable poems, pieces of what made up the classic Psalter in 500 BCE. The scribes, in doing their work, expanded the Psalter to the 150 that we have now. The scribes reached way back into the combined history of the Israel and Judah, and no doubt picked up songs and pieces of music and poetry that the people had long used. These scribes took those pieces, they reworked part of them to reflect the times in which they were then living and after the defeat. They wrote and rewrote many psalms until we have today the 150 in the book of Psalms. The Psalms were a careful educational effort by the scribes to provide a way for the Israelite people, again, to understand God. The Psalms contain poems, prayers of petition and protest and praise. Petition, protest, and praise. When you read the Psalms, it reminds me of a complaint box. You have a complaint box in the office. Because some of the Psalms, when you read them, are really irritated with Yahweh, really, really, really aggravated at their deity because they felt like, in given instances, that Yahweh, the deity, their God, had abandoned them, just left them to fend for themselves. Where are you? We'll read a psalm that encapsulates that in a minute. But always in the midst of the in the midst of the protest and petition, there is praise. You read along in many of the Psalms, and the first half of the Psalm will be, God, where are you? My enemies are besetting me. I have nothing left. Like lions, they're coming after me. And then before the Psalm ends, the psalmist would say, but I thank you for your steadfast love. So there's praise. The ancient scribes wanted the people to feel comfortable talking about Yahweh. Yahweh was not so distant from them that they could not talk about Yahweh, and they could not complain to Yahweh. This was regular. They questioned the activity of the deity. They questioned the activity of Yahweh in their daily lives. Always, though, with praise, always coming back to say, this is what we feel, but what do we know about what really is going on in the world and in the greater world of Yahweh? Which says to me in our time that we too can complain to Yahweh. We can complain to God. One of the great questions that we struggle with is, why does a good God, we think God is good, Yahweh is good, why does Yahweh allow bad things to happen? And we complain about that. And that is perfectly legitimate to complain about that. It is also perfectly legitimate to petition Yahweh, God, Adonai, to do something about it. Always, though, the loop comes back to us to say, you must be the one to do something about this. We are God's hands and feet. You know, you've heard that story a lot. But always praise, always praise. You don't ever forget the many benefits of God. So, and the poems, the Psalms are gorgeous pieces of literature. People have, for decades now, have studied the Psalms and come up with all kinds of ideas about them. There are 5 books of Psalms. I mean, like the Pentateuch, there are 5 divisions of the Psalter and all like that. So anyway, I want us to take a few minutes now and read from some of the Psalms, 4 or 5 that I have listed here, and I will talk about them just a minute. You have a question, JW can help you. If you have a question, he can help you interject that question if you want to talk about it to me. Okay, people, let's just move ahead then. The first Psalm that I want us to look at is Psalm 1. I want us to, I will read that. It's the first Psalm. The scholars say the first Psalm sets the stage for the entire Psalter. It's a beautiful and powerful piece of literature. So it is the one of the overriding themes of the first Psalm is delight in the Torah. And most of the translations talk about the law of God, but probably the better translation of that is to talk about the Torah. The Torah, as you know, are the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible are the Torah. And I have spent the last 2 years with a number of very bright, wonderful friends who happen to be Jewish while we were living in Bethesda. And the Torah is the central piece of their life. In fact, one of the people that I got to know well, she said, all that I know is Torah. I don't know the rest of the Hebrew Bible, but I do know Torah. The way the Torah is set, it is set during the wilderness wandering of the Jews. You know, they were in Egypt. Moses led them out. They wandered 40 years before the Bible says they went in to try to conquer the land of Canaan. And the Torah, these first 5 books, which is really the law of God. This is the way Yahweh wanted to relate to the people, and the way that Yahweh wanted them to relate to Him and to the rest of the world. So the Torah is in there. And typically we understand the Torah coming out of the wilderness wandering. Dr. Wright says, though, that the Torah, the 5 books that we have, were brought together. Now, they probably existed in bits and pieces from antiquity, but the scribes in that period of exile brought together what pieces of literature that they had, of holy writ that they had, and added to it. And so rather than the Torah being a product of the wilderness wandering, the Torah is probably finally a product of the Exodus. I mean, of the exile, not of the Exodus, but of the exile. Again, people would disagree with that, but that is what I'm understanding. So the Torah. Let me read Psalm 1. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the Torah. Blessed are those, he's saying here in the Psalm, blessed are those who meditate on Yahweh's word in the Torah, in these 5 books. Their delight is in the Torah of Yahweh. And on the Torah of Yahweh, they meditate day and night. Now, I love this next line here. It's a beautiful, I think probably the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful lines in the Psalter. What he's saying, those who delight in the Torah are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in their season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. So the psalmist here is shifting his emphasis from warfare, which was typical of the way those kingdoms related, and it was the warfare that cost these two kingdoms their lives, shifting the warfare to meditation. And another very beautiful shift that they talk about here, they shift David, their great hero, great hero of the ancient Israelite people. They shift David from warrior to poet and songwriter. And that's why so many of the Psalms have the superscription, a Psalm of David. You go through there and you'll see that again and again. Probably David did not write all of those Psalms. The books of Kings, First Kings, Samuel, somewhere, I didn't look it up. Saul is terribly disturbed. Saul is depressed, and he brings in David to sing to him on his harp. Little David, play on your harps. So David, nominally, historically, was something of a poet, but the Psalters, the Psalms, want to make him a poet rather than a warrior. They want to shift him to that understanding. So, but it goes on to say, but the wicked are not so. They don't meditate on the law of the Lord, and nothing that they do works out. So he makes the contrast there between those who meditate on the Torah and those who ignore the word of God. That's the first Psalm. Pardon me. You can read it for yourself. Beautiful language. You can read it yourself. Let's move on to Psalm 19. These are just samples that I have picked. In the Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of Yahweh, from Psalm 19. And the superscription here is always, to the choir master, a psalm of David. Apparently, among ancient Hebrew Israelite worship, there were choirs. And when they gathered for worship, these choirs provided music. And so the psalmist wanted to give some direction there. So this Psalm 19, and we have our own pieces of music set to this also, a Psalm of David. The superscriptions are not scripture, but they are part of the Psalter from antiquity. So the superscriptions to this or that choir master or this or that group or this David is ancient writing, not scripture, but ancient writings. So Psalm 19, I'm just going to read a part of it, starts out, the heavens are telling the glory of Yahweh, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. This is a song about Yahweh's creation. We'll be looking at that in the fourth of our Thursdays here, how particularly the beautiful language in Genesis talks about creation. We'll do this a whole lot more, but when the psalmist wrote, they were aware of the Babylonian myths about creation, the Gilgamesh epics. You perhaps studied some of those. In that mythology, the universe was created out of blood, guts, and sex. This was the Babylonian idea of the great cosmic battles between dragons and women, and you have to look at all that. We'll do it more. So creation in the Babylonian idea was a product of blood and violence. When the Hebrews decided that they would begin to try to formulate how the created order came into being, they took an entirely different tack. And they have Yahweh, Elohim, and that creating worlds with words. I love that phrase from Dr. Wright's book. Words created worlds. And it was good. And it was no blood and guts, no brutal sex, none of that fierce kind of Babylonian idea. And we'll look, and this Psalm 19 encapsulates the Hebrews, the ancient Israelites' idea of creation that is good, not a product of battle, but a product of love and honor and careful architecture. Art and architecture are part and parcel of the creation in the Hebrew Bible. Incomparable. They're not writing science. They're not trying to tell how all of this happened. They might have been talking to the best of their ability, and don't ever discount the science of Assyria and Egypt and Babylon. They had a fairly sophisticated science, but when they wrote about it, they employed this kind of fantastical language, this mythology of the blood, guts, and battles. So, Psalm 19, praising God and introducing to their world and to us in 2024 a gorgeous idea of creation, a creation in which human beings are stewards, are responsible. We'll talk some more about we sapiens are the last ones now, the last of the species to survive, and the care of this world that we have been given is ours to do for. Okay, so that's the heavens are declaring the glory of God. Now, Psalm 22 is a cry of anguish. A lot of the New Testament, here we go, a lot of the Christian Testament scholars say that the gospel writers, all four of them in various ways, lifted aspects of Psalm 22 to frame the crucifixion of Jesus. If you know, if between all four of the Gospels, we have seven, what we typically call the seven last words of Jesus from the cross, and they're scattered through the four Gospels. But here, we open with Jesus on the cross crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? This comes directly from Psalm 22. So the gospel writers, some 40, 50, 60 years after the event of Jesus' death, if you please, put words in Jesus' mouth from the Psalms. And I'm thinking that here he had done his very best for the people and to serve Yahweh. And here he was dying on a cross. I could imagine that with what little mind he had left and breath he had left, he's bound to have wondered, where's God in all of this? My God, why have you forsaken me? But the language comes directly from Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry day by day, but you do not answer, and by night I find no rest. This is the psalm and yet here we go. He's complaining, and yet here the psalmist comes right back and say, yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. And you, our ancestors, they trusted, and you delivered them. The psalm goes on, I am a worm, and yet that you love me. I am a worm, and yet I have great value. And on down in here, the psalmist laments the fact that he is only dust and that people are casting money, gambling for his clothes. And this also is a part of one of those words that as Jesus is dying on the cross, the soldiers are gambling for his clothes. Can't imagine what kind of clothes he might have had by then. But anyway, that's the way. But Psalm 22 gives voice to that cry. And I would imagine that we've all cried that sometime or the other when bad things happen out of the blue, when the loved one went to work that day and then didn't come home. They just didn't make it. So we cry that. Quickly, the next psalm that we look at is the most beautiful psalm of all and the most famous, along with the song Amazing Grace. Probably the 23rd Psalm is the most famous piece of literature in the world. When we were still living in Maryland at our assisted living there, we had a retired two-star general, General Tom Brain, lived there. And one day he and I were talking about the Psalms. He was a man of deep faith. And he said he he graduated West Point, he went to Vietnam, did all that. But he said, I always had the small New Testament in my shirt pocket, and Psalm 23 was marked in that little testament, in that little book. He said, I never went anywhere, period, as a soldier without having this great line of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. Gorgeous language. We could just about say it by heart. How many funerals have we attended? How many great celebrations have we done? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Leads me beside still waters. That whole beautiful thing, he prepares a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Uh, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The house being in the presence of the Lord forever. Incomparable language, just incomparable language that gets down inside of us. And you can hear uh, those Israelite people, and particularly in the earlier days, early decades of that Babylonian captivity, thought their world had absolutely ended. It was all over. And yet the scribes are giving them this kind of language. It is not over. God, the Lord, Yahweh, is your shepherd. He cares for you. He and that would have been a source of great comfort to them as they tried to figure out the new lives that they had. So, Psalm 23, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You're with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Quickly, Psalm 90. I picked that because it talks about numbering our days. Uh, you in Psalm 90, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. And you can't beat language like that. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are Yahweh. And again, we hark back to their beautiful idea of creation. Even before you formed the world, the psalmist says, uh, you knew us. We were a part of you. Uh, And then it concludes, so teach us to number our days that we may gain a wise heart. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us. So afflictions come, but make us bear it, make us happy in it. And for as many years as we have seen evil, let your work be manifest to your servants and your glories, the power of their children. Um, and it is a beautiful, beautiful piece there. It concludes with, let the words of my mouth, or let the favor of Yahweh, our God, be upon us and prosper us for the work of our hands. Oh, prosper the work of our hands. Okay, finally, I need to quit. An excerpt of one of my favorite Psalms, which is Psalm 103. Uh, Bless the Lord, O my soul, or bless Yahweh, O my soul, and that all that is within me bless his holy name. Bless Yahweh, O my soul, and do not forget all his benefits. Uh, and this is a psalm that tells us that Yahweh is involved in every aspect of our lives. He in the good times and the bad, when things are going great, when things are going terrible, Yahweh, God, Adonai, is much a part of us. The I just can't say enough about all of these, and these are just absolute samples to let us know, number one, the hearts of the people that wrote them, their the scribes' commitment to provide hope and sustenance for the people who have been defeated, and in their genius and in this power of the Spirit, what they did 2,500 years ago is as fresh and vital to us today as any poet of Robert Frost or anybody else. The words are here. They do not go away. This is our everlasting hope. So, I thank you for staying with me in this. Thank JW for helping. But this is a sample of the Psalms, the song book of Israel, the song book, really, of the Christian church. Is the book of Psalms. Thank you, and God bless. And I hope you have a good day. Bye.